So at an early age, it wasn't just about the coaching. It was about the realness of like helping people, just helping kids, trying to mold their life. And that's one thing that I took through my life, more than just, hey, let's run a 50 defense, let's blitz, let's run a 3-4, let's do certain things. So, uh, that's just, those were the early days that, I took from it. And I always admired the fact that, he took that mentality into being a public official.
Today we have uh, a gentleman who started out as my personal coach, eighth grade football, back in what, 91, I think.
That's it.
91. And through there has been a mentor, somebody that I've coached against and been a friend with for uh 30 years, a little over 30 years. So
it goes fast, that's for sure.
It does. So we have Eric Ungaro here today. And I think there's, I was thinking about this. There's many aspects that you have. We were just talking about your dad being a coach in the city at Rayen, you being a player at Ursuline, coaching in the city, and then spending, many years at Howland.
Yeah, with Coach Angle.
Yep. So, basically, really how we kind of start is we just start out with, maybe where you grew up, and I was wondering, what was kind of your introduction to football, just your origin story.
Okay, I got it. I can't hear in this, so I don't know if it came unplugged or it doesn't matter. Could you guys hear me? Okay, you're good. So, I mean, obviously, I was born into a family of coaches and teachers. My dad, before he became mayor, got into politics. He was a guidance counselor and a head football coach at Rayen. So, and you're talking about the heydays in the 70s where, guys that really gave a lot to this area, be it Chester Leon, Ron Domesco, those guys all started with my father on that staff at Rayen. And so, at the age of 5, 6 years old, I'm going with Dominic Leon down, watching guys hit the sled, running up and down the hill at Rayen. The hill is still there. And then obviously when you went to those games back then, you just had people all the way down Bonita, all the way over to St. Ed's Church, all the way down Coronat. Like it was real. I mean, people were in there packing those stadiums, and there were some good games going on. And we were just even talking about his last year. Dennis Mosley, who was probably one of the greatest running backs to ever come out of this area, broke all the records at Iowa, had a little career in the NFL. He broke his ankle the game before they had to play Cheney. And Cheney was legit. I mean, they had Kavanaugh, Cal Cagney, and those guys. I mean, that was their, like, really their good heyday. And, just seeing that and seeing my dad, like, put all that in, and, to help these kids. And even historically, when he became mayor, I think one of the things that I really took from all of this is, you grew up in the city. If the city had 1,200 workers at the time, there was 2 minorities working. Like now this was 1980s. This wasn't the 1950s. This wasn't like something crazy. 1,200 people when he became mayor. There was 2 minorities working. But then you know what he did? He hired guys like Dennis Mosley, Luther Foster, Jerry Young, guys that he coached. Gave them a life. I mean, these guys retired, and it wasn't easy then to do those types of things. So I think emulating that and seeing that through life of just being a coach, a teacher, a mentor, trying to help guys, get them jobs. And, that's what I, did with you in a certain sense. You ever call me, I give you my opinion. I try to help you guys out. Del Baccio, all those guys, Manny. So at an early age, it wasn't just about the coaching. It was about the realness of like helping people, just helping kids, trying to mold their life. And that's one thing that I took through my life, more than just, hey, let's run a 50 defense, let's blitz, let's run a 3-4, let's do certain things. So, that's just, those were the early days that, I took from it. And I always admired the fact that, he took that mentality into being a public official. Always stayed true to, the guys he coached and taught and worked with. And so, I was fortunate to have a good mentor. And, even when I went to South High School under Ron Domesco, he was that mold. The Stoopses, we can go on. I mean, these guys are legendary people in our area that have helped many of human beings. So I was brought into it young, 5 years old. I didn't have a choice. I went to Harding. Those guys would walk over. They'd come and get me, walk me down to practice. I'd have to sit there for 2 hours and, watch them get it in. And I don't regret 1 minute of it. So I was definitely brought into it early.
So that really kind of being a kid that tags along with dad to practice and those guys certainly being your heroes, right? That you see play. Did that give you a desire to be a player and
I think
do that?
I think number one, I knew my stipulations right away. Like I was a bigger, whatever, 6 foot, 6'1", hard-nosed kid. So I had a spot in football because back then everybody ran trap and lead.
Yeah.
So like I would take you on. Now I'd try to knock your head off. I couldn't catch you if you got around the corner. But so I knew, but you know what? I early on, playing for the little the North Side Knights, the little Redmen, and I think the good thing was growing up in the city then, you were with a lot of different groups of people. You had some wealthy guys, you were with minorities, you just learned to respect it and like, man up with each other and play and try to win. And I think that's what Ursuline brought to the table too. When I went there and I played, I was on a team that probably transcended Ursuline at the time because they were pretty good in the early 80s. Then we fell off a little bit. But my senior year, we beat Moeller. And I think if there's 22 positions on a team, me and my man Danny Parks, we were the only two-way players, and we were the only two got no scholarship. But we were just hard-nosed guys. I mean, we probably had – you're talking Diallo Anderson, Tim Caffey, Brian Cook, Bonoski. I mean, these guys, we're not talking about chump stuff. We're talking about, going to Ohio State, going to Toledo and getting full rides. So it was a dynamic time. And I brag because I say I do think it was the greatest football season ever because Mooney won state. Boardman, it was their best team. They lost to Coleraine on the last second pitch. Gerard had Cochran in them guys. They were no joke. Camel had Sean Patton in them. And then you go to Struthers. Struthers had John Jarrett and those guys. Like, you're talking about an era of football that in that 80s, and you only took 4 teams. So there was a lot of teams that got, obviously got kept out and kicked out of the playoffs. But so, I was fortunate to play in that time where, we didn't make the playoffs because, Mooney did. Mm-hmm. And, Boardman made the playoffs, but Fitch didn't. So it was like, it was tough back then. But I did love it. And I'm really fortunate that I did. I wish I would have tried to give college like a shot, but I just didn't really have a whole lot of confidence in myself because the game was transcending a little bit then. Started getting a little bit more wide open. And just speed started to become a little bit of issue. And I had a torn ACL, so I wasn't fast to begin with. And then, obviously you go through an ACL repair, you kind of slow down a little bit.
I kind of have a circle back question.
Yep.
And, my father has a reputation and a name ahead of mine within the city. So it's always preceded me in every level of schooling that I've done, sports, you name it. So while I never felt pressured to have to reach a certain level of expectation, I was always aware that there was an expectation attached to me. Your dad, he was a formidable player himself coming out of Rayen, and I in my research I was looking, and it said that he transferred to Rayen his senior year from East. Do you have any insight into that and why that took place?
Well, down in Smoky Hall, what they did is redrew the boundaries, and so during that time, Smoky Hollow, like half the hollow went to East and the other half went to Rayen. Mm-hmm. So he was there. And I think the reality of it is, I think he got thrown in jail, juvenile. He was starting to get into some trouble. And I'm not saying East is where the bad kids were, but the East Side at that time, that's where, I don't know, you use the word mafia, I mean, like that's where like a lot of those guys were over in that area. And I think it was fortunate that they did redraw the boundary. He ended up going to Rayen. So that was the reason right there. So a little bit of getting in trouble and a little bit of fate that, did get kind of cut up down there, and he ended up going over to Rayen and played quarterback and went to YSU. And, he had a formidable little, just at least say he was participating. He was out there, and then he ended up going to the Army. So,
yeah. So, my obviously with us all growing up in the city, and then with you getting a front row seat every day into the reach and the personality that your dad developed over all those years. My first memory and interaction with him, I think I was a second grader right after he got elected. And he came to our community breakfast at Cleveland School. Now, I was relaying this to Dallas the other night, and you being in education, that children are able to see when someone's genuine and when they're just putting on a front. And I remember your dad being very highly engaged and just fitting in and really being interested in us as kids and what we were doing in that school at that time. And then for him to be the mayor, throughout my whole school career, even when I got into college, I came back to, just observe the team as they were preparing for playoffs. And your dad was out there to speak to the team. Yeah. And, it's rare that you find a person in politics that kind of really sticks to the core of who they are. Where do you think that came from, and why do you think he had such an affinity for this city for so long?
I think it's number one, it was coaching. And I hate to say it, it sounds generic, but when you're just a politician first, then you become that quote, like sleazy politician. I mean, when you're a guidance counselor, a coach, and you, like you said, you stick true to your words, you hire guys that need some help, man, that really, it was hard to do at the time. I think it's easier to be who you are. And I think we circled back from the start of it is that's probably the biggest thing that I took from him is seeing what you just described right there. Going to a South High School basketball game. He ended up becoming the principal in 80, and we talked about it. That's probably one of the best teams ever that, again, you only took 4 teams, Garcia Lane and Willie Green and Brian Morrow. I mean, that seeing the interaction he had even as a principal. So it wasn't just the coaching aspect. It was the principal taking kids home, buying them shoes. And then that's what I emulated when I got there, not because I felt like I had to, but it's just who we were, who our family was. And those are probably the best coaches, going to Wilson and taking guys to breakfast. I saw my dad do that for years. And so I think by starting out humble, just, growing up on Fairgreen, everybody perceives him as the mayor. We lived on Fairgreen. It wasn't nothing special. And he became a councilman. It was a coach at Rayen, and it just worked his way up. And, that's pretty much what I did. Started 7th, 8th grade. Ended up getting a break, had a great group of kids that I'm close to all these guys now. Mike Eccles and them. I mean, he coached me for years. That's just, you always want money. You always want to kind of make it, hit the lotto. I really do believe as I'm winding down on my career and as my dad was winding down on his, those were the things that I respect and appreciate and enjoyed the most in life. And he would say the same thing. It wasn't getting an interview or, doing some political stuff. It was, taking Dennis home after practice and, getting him a hamburger and, bringing him. That's just what it was about. And I do feel the same way. So I think he was vested just because he was vested. It wasn't phony. It wasn't just like some made up, like, oh, let me go get a photo op, let's go do this. It just, because there was no Twitter and Snapchat and all that stuff back then. People didn't even really know what you were doing unless you were actually there.
So what does he impart to you in terms of athletics? I imagine as a player and a competitor and a coach that he certainly had an opinion. He probably had a lot to do with your development. What were those moments like as you're progressing as a player in your own right, to come home and dad, the mayor, who's an ex-coach and a principal, is critiquing your game?
You know what? It was easy for me because back then it was just like, don't be soft. Like there was no like, nothing. Hey, use the right forearm, keep your left outside. It was just like, man, don't come soft, man. Like that was just our era. You know what I mean? You were in a phone booth. It was two tight ends, man, with a fullback. And I mean, that's why I was able to survive. So that's probably why I forget some things today, but that's all right. So that was just, that was just probably, it was good because again, it molded me with my kids too, because he was the mayor. He was a coach, but he didn't get involved. He wasn't one of them dads like, oh, hey, Coach Angle, my kid should be playing fullback. No, you're a guard, go play guard. He never got involved. So I think, and that's probably what changed the most in society. Just in my opinion, the last 30 years, it's really not the kids, it's more the parents. And I mean, maybe it's a combination because society's a lot softer now with the internet and phones and things like that. But parents just really got involved, man, like overboard, probably in the last 10 years. Now, even as an administrator, you probably see it, a teacher. So that's what I took from them. Hey, just work hard, do your best. I never pouted, if they moved me to guard or tackle. That's just what he instilled in me, man. You just do whatever's best for the team and move on.
How did you end up at Ursuline? So, you mentioned, I would assume, being at Ursuline, maybe you started at St. Ed's, but you talked about going to Harding. What was that kind of progression?
I think I started out, I went to public school up until 6th grade.
Okay.
And then, so the north side at that time, I mean, you had like your actual St. Ed's kids, that just went to Catholic school from the start. I fell into that big group of people that went to Harding, K through 6. But then, going into 7th grade, it just comes down to, all right, where's most of your guys going? What do you want to do? Because Rayen was a great school. Rayen had a lot of success during that time in the 80s. So it wasn't like Rayen was like something, like you were at Cleveland East or something. Yeah. I mean, it was successful. And just the majority of my friends went there. And I just said, hey, let me try St. Ed's. I went to actually Hayes like for, maybe like a week. And most of my buddies went to St. Ed's. I switched over and it was a good move for me because I got to meet a lot of great people. I mean, that is one thing. Ursuline was a heck of a melting pot, man. I mean, it was probably like Cheney. Matter of fact, me and my sister were even kind of talking about this. She's a guidance counselor at Liberty. There's not a whole lot of like diversified schools in America. Like, forget just Youngstown. Like, right. It's either inner city or it's suburban. I mean, there's not a whole lot of, mixed schools where there's, wealthy, there's all different ethnicities and things like that. And I think that's one thing that Ursuline really had at the time, that really helped me just kind of mold and learn to treat different people with respect and, move on from there. So it was pretty good. I mean, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it greatly.
And so that was
84.
84.
And then my dad just became mayor then. So it was tough on me a little bit. Now I was the oldest. And I had a brother that eventually overdosed and died. And it probably even got worse for him and worse for my sisters. I mean, there's a dynamic of, because you figure back then, like, again, there wasn't social media. Like, Pat Ungaro was on the news like every day. Like, because there was only 3 channels. There was only, a newspaper, and it was popular. Everybody read it. So, we go there in 84. He becomes mayor. And Ursuline at the time was good. They were good. But then, like, we just fell off a cliff for maybe 2 years in there. And I don't even think really during that time anybody was crazy good. But then, like, again, we beat Cincinnati Moeller my senior year, kind of put Ursuline back on the map. That was a huge game. They were undefeated. I don't think they've lost a game. They came up to YSU, and it was sold out. I mean, that's what was going on at that time. And we ended up beating them. And it really put Coach Angle on the map. It put Ursuline back on the map. And really just our whole community, because Mooney had it going. They kept it going during that time. And it was a monumental time for us at Ursuline. And we just kind of catapulted us going into the future.
Yeah, you see that book over there. Do you have that book?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I was reading the news articles about that Moeller game.
Yeah.
And I was looking at that your senior year. You go 6-0.
So,
and then you drop 4 straight. Now,
yeah.
Boardman.
You lose Boardman 7-6, Mooney 7-6. Then we lost to St. Vives, who ended up going deep. We lost 14-13 to them. And then really there was a little bit of a debacle the last game. So, some guys got suspended, like half our team got suspended going into the Struthers game. Won't get into exactly what went down, but and we had to go to Struthers. All we had to do was win to get in the playoffs. But we were down about 10 guys that had some discipline problems. And again, you're going to play like probably the best Struthers team they ever had.
Mm-hmm.
It was John Jarrett and those guys. I mean, he had a great career in the NFL. And we lost on the last second field goal. So it was brutal. It was a brutal time.
So it took 10 starters for
Struthers
to beat you.
And John Jarrett. And John. Believe me,
John Jarrett. Yeah, and Penn State NFL.
Yeah.
Well, so when you say that, we're really talking about and we were experiencing a slight population decline during those 80s, but you're still talking about a relatively small city and outer ringing area, being packed and full of hard-nosed, talented individuals. And it doesn't matter if you grow up in Brownlee Woods or Struthers or Liberty or what have you. If you go back a generation and look at that person's parents, they're probably right from in the city. They're probably from a steel background or some type of blue-collar background. And then, there's just that competition in everything that you do as a kid being raised during that era. It doesn't matter if you're on the playground, riding bikes, racing in the streets. You just don't have a generation of kids that are timid, afraid, and scared to compete against each other. So it doesn't surprise me when you say how tough it is, to start out 6-0 and then have a string of losses, because the higher that you get, the more people want to knock you down off of that pedestal. So,
absolutely.
When you're experiencing your rise at Ursuline and kind of getting into those battles with those different teams from different areas, what is your approach to those games, and like, who are the teams that you're getting up for personally, because you may have some type of stake on the other side going against that other squad?
It was always Mooney. I mean, there was no doubt about it. Because, first of all, and like different coaches get beat up for like, oh, you guys always lost to Mooney. I mean, everybody lost to Mooney. Like,
right.
You know what I'm saying? I hate to say it. Like, you can't just like single out, Dick Angle or Anarella. I mean, like them guys just, they found a way to win a game 7-6, like more than anybody on the planet. So when you would get up for that game, and I wasn't like a diehard Catholic school kid because I only went there a couple years, but all the kids from the other side. You knew Chickaretti and Allen and Vecchione and those guys. So you played against them. You went through them. You knew them through the years, and you just really tried. You tried hard to go beat them, but everybody was good. You hit it on the head. There was no soft team in our area, like, period. We just talked about Gerard. I mean, Nick Cocker is probably one of the best athletes ever come out of this area. Yeah. He could have played quarterback anywhere in the country, and he was a
linebacker.
Yeah, probably. Oh, he's all swelled up now. I always tell him he looks like a linebacker. But Sean Patton, he could have been a tailback any school anywhere in America, anywhere. Yes. I mean, he was, if he played in this day and age, was able to clap his hand and do all this stuff and run around, he'd have been Lynn Bowden before there was Lynn Bowden. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But the good thing was, it was just, man, the support was crazy. And even like when I was getting ready to, even pondering going to college, a couple D3 schools, my dad's like, seriously, you got to try to go to what? You just played in front of like 20,000 people at YSU Stadium, and you want me to come up with like 20 G's for you to go to West Main? Like, come on, man.
That comment, I mean,
seriously,
that's a realistic comment.
Yeah.
No, and he told me, you think you're sweet? Have Angle. You're going to Kent, because, I wanted to, quote, get away. I didn't want to be a coach and teacher at the time. I wanted to make money. I wanted to be an accountant. He goes, tell Angle, hook you up at Kent, try to get you a walk on and see how sweet you are. I went up there. I said, "Man, I'm not that sweet."
That's a horrible thing for a father to say to his son.
The only thing it did, it got me. It saved me probably about $200,000 in student loans, though, because I would have thought I was
love
hard.
that. Yes, and I had the Division II experience, so I wish I would have had your dad whispering in my ear, like, "Yeah,
Well,
you're gonna go
D2s, they
pay
get
to
money
play."
at least, though, man. You know,
Not
D2, you
enough.
get some. I know. But you're right, though. You think about it. YSU was sold out. Even your games. I mean, you guys. I mean, you played at Fitch, man. You could. But it's just a microcosm of America, our community. It's shrinking, obviously. And there's probably going to Howland. I was at Howland for the last 20 some years with Engel. We had great success. We, put a lot of kids into college, and it's just right now. You just look at it. How many D1ers are going on right now from our area? Yeah, like if you're lucky. You're lucky.
But so, and I think, so you're talking about 87, all those guys.
Yep.
When was Black Monday? When Steelman was closed? 77?
Right.
77.
Yeah, right before my dad became mayor.
So
yep.
You probably still got some of those people lingering
Yep.
around. Hey, hanging on. Maybe I can make it. Or they could have got bought out.
General Motors was big.
Right. So you still had a core of people and communities that were still trying to hang on as long as they could.
Absolutely.
And now it used to just be your Catholic schools would pull from different areas.
Oh yeah.
Now every school is
open enrollment killed that stuff.
Right.
I mean, look you had Hubbard, had LJ and those guys. Those dudes would have been at Ursuline in the 90s or Mooney. They wouldn't have been at Hubbard. No, there wasn't nobody going to Hubbard at the time. But you hit it on the head, Dallas. So it's like there's more places for. Not only are we shrinking, and there's not as much, quote, elite talent as there was in the day, but then there's different options. Yeah. I mean, they're all over. Like you can go look at Fitch. Fitch is probably 5 best athletes are Youngstown kids. And that was never the case back in the day. Those kids would have been at Mooney or Ursuline, or they would have been at Cheney. I mean, you guys went on a great run in the 90s. During that whole span, you guys had great athletes, and really even the city schools did. When I was at Wilson, and East was loaded.
They always did. I don't think that blueprint has changed. It's just a matter of, what are you doing to accentuate the talent? What are you doing to develop the talent? Because even during the era that I played in and that era prior to me, I could think of dozens of guys who were very talented, very athletic, but maybe the scheme wasn't quite right, or maybe the off-season lifting program wasn't in place. And if you would have took those same guys and put them over here, they would have been all-state type kids. And you touching on that, you kind of have a varied experience, because you mentioned that you played in the Northside Knights organization, which, I know what that means when you say that. You don't even really have to go into detail. And then you also play for the Little Redmen, which is it's another facet of football organization, because if I'm comparing the two based off of, my knowledge of what those organizations were, the Northside Knights always were very tough, physical teams coming through there. And then when you went over and looked at the Little Redmen, they were very organized and very poised teams. So you kind of get the best of both worlds heading into junior high, heading into high school. And then you return back to coaching within the inner city. What is your perspective of the football over the time that you coach, and obviously growing up in an era where it was very rich, very productive and competitive and a lot of parity, to going through an era coaching where it's top heavy, and you're seeing some of those traditional teams that used to have their chance every once in a while just not be able to compete?
I think, Ron, I think you hit on something that's the most important, and this year probably exemplified it the most. you look at the two schools that won state this year. Make no mistake about it. Their staffs are the two staffs that have been together the longest. And you go back into like your era. It wasn't a surprise that Cheney was getting it in because Burtis and them guys were together, man. You had the staff. You had a level of excellence. Butchie was there for years. Engel was there for years. You go to Harding. So I think one thing that I saw that kind of fell apart a little bit is schools put a lot of emphasis on football during the majority of my coaching career. You need a defensive coordinator? Hey, he's a special ed teacher. We're going to hire him. Mm-hmm. Now as being a superintendent, they're not doing it. They're not. So slowly, like, guys became transient. You know what I mean? It was like a guy couldn't be a defensive coordinator at school for 30 years because he couldn't get a job there. So he would be there for X amount of time and kind of like move on. But so my time just starting out in the city, everybody had good staffs. You had Mark Lyden and them guys at East. They built a nice little dynasty. And then it got broken up, and them guys all went to Ursuline, Frost, and those guys, and Keelan Logan. Cheney obviously was who they were. The years Demesco and Stoops were at South, they were phenomenal. Wilson was always kind of the one that struggled early on. And then when South closed and we went over there, we obviously had a little influx of talent and we're competitive. But you guys were on a roll at that time during the 90s. Going to Howland, it was the same thing. We had the same staff. Me, Eccles, Engel, Coach Mendez. We had, like, for 20 years, these kids knew what to expect. If you were a father looking to go somewhere, outside of Harding or something, it was a destination spot because you knew what was coming from the coaches. You knew they care about you. There wasn't going to be turnover. Right now, it's just tough.
And I think there was an element of the professionalism of being a teacher was also brought to being a coach.
Yep.
Instead of just, hey, I coach, or I show up on Friday nights. Like Ron would always say, hey, everybody wants to be a coach on Friday night, but nobody wants to do what it takes Monday through Thursday.
Absolutely.
And I think that there was just a real, and I'm sure they're there now, and those are the ones that are successful.
Yeah. You talk about, like, you look at guys, like, I'm just using Coach Engel, for example, because we both kind of saw him in action. Like, this dude was at weightlifting every day.
Yeah.
Like every day. Like, Anarella was at weightlifting every day. Like, this just doesn't happen. That commitment and professionalism now, you got younger coaches, they're not teachers. They work at, wherever, Valorex, so they're working midnights, they're able to get there for practice and then they got to run. So it's all that whole combination of just building that 12-year program and rolling with it and having good success. And let me tell you something, Canfield's staff is no joke. Those guys been together. Mm-hmm. South Range, those guys have been together. Now it's different microcosms. Obviously it's a league that's a suburban league out there. It's not like a Harding or Ursuline or Mooney. But you know what? It's still successful. It's like when you see these teams like Kirkland and them. Coach has been there like 30 years. Yeah. There's merit to it. So I think that's, those are just the different moving pieces that I see with coaching. And then, parent involvement, man, it got brutal. Like, it really did. It just, football was kind of the last sport to get it because, obviously hoops could be dictated by AAU. Baseball, you got a million traveling baseball teams. Every dad's a coach. Where football, it's a little harder for a dad to just be like a coach. They'll try peewees, but once you get into 7th, 8th grade, you're in the school system and you're there. But man, it's just open enrollment a little bit. The downside of it is, they shop their kids around. And the state is still trying to catch up to, kids moving and getting, they come with different rules. Oh, you got to sit out the first 6 games. Oh no, you got to sit out the last 6 games. They're trying to catch up to it too, because kids go somewhere. I'm the quarterback. Nah, you're not the quarterback. And they just go somewhere else. And then when you don't have that elite athlete, now everybody's a tailback. They used to come to Howland and I go, you see Devion Smith? That's the tailback. And they'd be like, oh, all right. Yeah, that's the tailback. But hey, if you think you're as good as the dude that's ahead of you, oh, forget it. I'm leaving. I'm going to JFK or, I'm going to Cortland or I'm going somewhere. So it has caused parents to have a little more, a little more say at the table. And hey, but Seth is doing a great job at Cheney right now. I just went and talked to their coaches, was talking defense with those guys. He's doing a nice job. I probably just hindsight, I probably wouldn't have, went back to 2 schools. That was just my opinion at the time. But, they made a decision because I think they had something good going. Now, could it have, moved to Cheney or been, but they had a nice little thing going. They had a nice squad. Morrow was there and those guys and Emil. And I just think once you split it up, you just don't, I don't know if you have enough talent with the way kids could leave to have 2, high level teams.
Well, I mean, yeah, okay, 2. I was going to say because
Yeah.
Cheney did.
Oh no, Cheney
pretty well.
Well,
and
because
East was, but there again, there was one.
There was one.
There's, I don't know, Culliver. He's gonna make a dent, I believe. He's gonna come in and. But is that gonna take away some of the shine of Cheney, maybe, or it'll be interesting for sure.
It 100% will, because too, and scheduling is important. Like we talk about all these other moving pieces. Like when I was at South High School my first year, I mean, we had to play Lakewood St. Edwards, Harding, Canton McKinley with Shea Bryant, and you're going up there with like 27 dudes from the South Side. Come on, Ron. You know what I mean? Like it was like seriously. Like I don't care if you brought an Ursuline Mooney team combined, they're going to lose. Yeah. So what they got to do at East is they got to really, but then you got to find the schools. You got to find the schools that are going to play East that are outside of Harding, Boardman, Fitch, Ursuline, Mooney. Pick up some teams where they can get some little layup wins, because everybody gets some layup wins in there.
Now, as you get into coaching, how are those early experiences for you? And then when you're able to look back with that backwards lens, where did your growth happen at, like during your coaching career? Where did you make the biggest leaps in games?
I would say number one, when I went with Ron Domesco to South High School. Now I was 19 years old, and like you're saying, Gilbert's and those guys and Darnell's, they were 18. Yeah. So, and Domesco goes, "You're my defensive coordinator." And I was like, okay, I got to problem solve here real quick. So I remember the first thing we did was everybody was always a 50 defense. Mm-hmm. I said, guys do not want to play DN in the city. Like we need to be a 3-4. Like it just, just be a little bit more aggressive, call them outside linebackers and go from there. So I think from a survival standpoint, there was nothing more valuable than that first year. And then once we closed, like Ron Domesco at the time was kind of the odds-on favorite to get the Wilson job because he was very well respected, and Mike McClendon got it. So, having to learn there the transition and bringing those 2 teams together. And matter of fact, it was the strike season, and we were good. We were 5-0 and the strike came. And I think we lost to Floyd and them guys. I think it was like, I don't know what, it was like 14-7. It was nothing bad.
Right.
But so to bring those 2 schools together was hard. Like it made you mature real fast because you were juggling a lot of different things. I mean, Wilson at the time was, you don't want to call it a soft school, but it was a good place for teachers to be teaching. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So then I go through my career, and then when I got with Coach Engel, that's when it kind of opened my eyes to, you saw it as a player at Ursuline, but just the year round, just juggling of everything, boosters and weightlifting and doing it from a coaching standpoint. You always saw it as a player, but what'd you do? You went lift and you went home. These guys, man, them guys were there. Engel and them guys he'll stay there overnight. Burtis would stay overnight. Butchie would stay overnight. They put the time in and they did a good job. So I think my growth as far as seeing what really needed done, that was probably just under that whole 20 years with Coach Engel and us having a great understand the importance of a staff and getting along and no egos and just, I came in, he's like, "Hey man, you're going to run our 4-4. had that soft 4-4 defense sitting there like Coke bottles. And I go, well, this isn't my thing. He goes, well, then prove that you can get us into 3-4 and do some things and blitz a little bit more. And, thank God he worked well with me, and we had success. So I think those are where the growth, actually came. Surviving early on, learning how to juggle people. And you remember, you were living it. It was brutal in the city in the 90s. This stuff now is like flag for you talking to Crips, like Darius Love. I used to bring Big D home. Like you're going on Ravenwood. Like it was, you know what I'm saying? There's crack houses. There's gangs going on. It was a time where those kids could very easily not play football and go and really do well financially. It's not like today at all.
Yeah.
So you had to really go overboard, get guys shoes, take them to breakfast, and really show them that you cared.
I'm glad you said that because I coached down here at Columbus East High School for a couple of years, and then when you come from that inner city dynamic, there's that extra layer that to be a coach you have to deal with and respond to that some other programs may not ever have an encounter with. And you saying that having to take kids home, going to certain neighborhoods and get a first-hand view of what they're up against and what they're doing just to get themselves to and from practice, the pitfalls and the dangers that they're trying to avoid in doing that, that's a whole extra burden that a kid has to get through before they can think about what they're going to do in between the lines or what they're going to do on a Friday night. So I appreciate you saying that and bringing that up because it speaks to the type of man that you are. And I think the apple just doesn't fall far from the tree for you to put yourself in that position to even care enough to want to see those kids get back and forth. And even if it's not a college scholarship, even if it's not playing football beyond high school, you may have bought that person extra time for avoiding a trap that was laid for them that they just didn't step into because they had football to rely on.
I agree with you. I agree 100%.
If you're looking back at your experience in that downhill head-on collision style that we all grew up in, as a strategist, how would you approach coaching in this era where the football is a little bit more wide open and spread out?
I think like my last couple of years at Howland, it became more of just really what college became is more like hybrid guys on defense. We kind of had to go from a 3-4 to a 3-5. I mean, you almost have to be in some form of nickel package. We were just talking to the Cheney coaches about that the other day, just because you're getting everything wide open, 3-by-1s and 2-by-2s. There's no, that's why these teams, hey, let me tell you something. These teams, both that one state from here, they both had a tight end in the game. Mm-hmm. I mean, like people do not know how to, I'm watching the state championship game and the tight end, you would think the other teams look at them like they didn't even know how to line up to it. And they watched probably 10 films on them. So, it is the fine line between, and I think football evolved that way because of participation a little bit. I mean, I hate to say that, but our linemen, we don't have a whole lot of linemen anymore. So how do you, what do you do? Everybody thinks they're receivers. So just kind of put receivers out there, go to that trend. But so we had to go to a lot more nickel package later in later in my career, which is only a couple years ago. And we just always were, I was molded again, coaching at South. We just always were an attack type defense. I didn't want people thinking we'll roll the dice, we'll send some pressure and see what happens. And as long as everybody knew where they were supposed to be and we didn't give up like any big home runs. So I think that's kind of it. But once I saw Alabama kind of give up, I knew football was just done because I'm a big Alabama fan, not just because they won. I loved them just because that was my era when they beat Miami and Gene Stallings was a defensive guy. But man, they always had them big linebackers. big safeties. They were all first round draft picks, but they were losing, man. And he just said, forget it. Let's just go get receivers, a good quarterback, and just throw it around. Even running backs anymore aren't that, they're not that prized. As our era was all running backs. Like if you had a running back, I mean, you were in the game. Now,
well, you had to run the pass, right?
Yep. I mean, that's it. With these dudes, they want to just throw it and trick you up a little bit. And I think line play, Dallas would attest now. Everything's kind of zone scheme. There's really it's not like banging your head into the ground.
No, and we've talked about it. I mean, I think the differentiator now is being able to line up and really go at somebody, go through somebody's face mask. I mean, and that's a toughness mentality. But I think everybody's got an answer to RPOs or zone read or midline read. There is no answer to being able to line up and get forward just because you can go through somebody.
And you got to coach that.
Yeah.
You got to get your kids to believe that. That's the difference. Now, these young coaches, they want to get on the chalkboard and have the chalk last. It's boring to say, hey man, gap down, kick out, boom, 3 yards, 4 yards, 3rd and 2, boom, run it again. Just keep it's.
But I do think, like, you said participation. I mean, how many great, and both you guys, how many great athletes can you think about that back in that era maybe didn't get their just due because you did have a feature guy in the back? And I think that, so it's really, it's a balance of both.
Listen, I agree.
So I don't know, with today's mentality, I don't know how you get a team of 60 guys if they don't have a chance to get the ball.
And that's just it. I mean, you see even Ohio State, it's like they'll lose a game just because they got to give somebody a play just to give them a play instead of just like trying to win it. You know what I mean? It filters all the way down. So you're right, Dallas. I don't know how you do it right now. It's just with shrinking population, with not just what we have. It's like, I mean, look at how we got 2 schools going to 7-man football.
Yeah.
Big Botch out there in East Palestine, they're going to 7-man football. Sebring, I think they are. He said it.
Hey, it's like, I think about like flag football now, right? That kind of gives every future lineman some false hope. Like me, the only time I was ever going to be touching a ball is if I was snapping it.
That's it.
Which, but I was made a better athlete because I was out there playing with guys, playing tag with better athletes than myself, but it's just, I don't know. It's really a changing time, and society is getting into schools, it's getting into sports, and you got to figure out a way to navigate it.
And listen, and I think that was one thing that you hit on. Me starting out in the city made me a better coach later, because even like my wife, she started out as a teacher in the inner city, and then she eventually got a job in Poland. Like there's a lot of there's some stuff out there. Like you can't like cry about the little stuff, and it makes you a more compassionate person because you know what they were going through. And those days I will never forget. Those were my most favorite times of, again, and I did it even at Howland, like Tyreek Ellis. We had him. I picked him up every day on the north side, brought him to school. Not because he didn't even play defense for me, it was just, that's what we do. That's what you do. You take, hey, you want a granola bar, you want a Gatorade, let's go. Get your grades, make sure your grades.
What was it that attracted you to special education?
I think first I started working with the behavioral kids in the city, and I just fell in love with it. Like, now they were, we're talking SBH back in the day, severe behaviorally handicapped. Like I was at Harrison, and you know where that's at. That was like an alternative school. Correct. So I fell in love with it, and I just kept continuing that, that sidebar certificate, because at the time I just had like a teaching degree. I didn't actually have a special ed degree, but it was hard back then. I mean, schools made you pay. I mean, me and my wife, we were just teachers. I mean, and you're coming up with having to take 20 classes. Now you can go online and take something in, a week and become a special ed teacher. But I think it's the same thing that we've been talking about. I get these 7, 8 kids in my class. I get them jobs. I take care of them. I help them with their English homework, make sure they get their grades. That's just been my 30 years of this career, is just doing things like that. So it's easier to be that same person in special ed because you only got 10 kids that you're responsible for. It's harder to do that if you're an English teacher, honors English or geometry, because you're there for business, strictly grades. So I think it just fell in the same path that I had, taking care of kids, helping them out, and just, I tell the counselor, I'm like Red Cross. I save more lives than Red Cross. I tell them all the time. But it's the same.
When did you start? When did you start teaching?
I started teaching like 93. I went to Harrison.
Okay.
93, 94. I went to Harrison. I was at Harrison, and then Harrison closed, and I went over to Rayen. I was in their SBH program for a lot of years. And again, it just molded. It was one of my favorite times. And I think out of them 10 kids, I think there might be 1 or 2 that are alive. Guys like Larry Blue and Chaz Bunch. I mean, I still remember them like they were little kids, man. But that time was vicious in the city. It was in America. It wasn't just Youngstown. I mean, it was everywhere in the country. The inner cities were getting decimated with, the whole crack cane and gang stuff going on. And then, like when Coach Engel offered me a job, I took it basically just based off financial decisions. I probably got, a $20,000 raise. When you're making 30 grand, I mean, that's like, it's like you hit the lottery.
What, when you started out, so you go to, you're coaching me in middle school, right? That's your first year out of college, or, not out of college, but kind of transitioning.
Getting thrown out of Kent.
I don't know about that, but
I got thrown out of Kent, came back. But go
coaching kids. So I do remember we were playing in either a playoff game or a championship game, and your dad was up in the stands with the with the headphones. You got the little walkie-talkie.
Yep. He was like, run toss. That's all I guess. Hey, because we were good.
Oh yeah.
Eddie Palmer. I mean, he was nasty. We had Sean Penny. We had Eccles. I mean, them guys were, they were little scrawny dudes then. I tell them I toughened them up because I made them all play linebacker. I'm not no linebacker coach. I said, yeah, you are. Get in there. I'm blitzing you.
So why, what was the reason, or was there a reason that you didn't end up going back to Ursuline to coach?
I just think probably because I loved it in the city at the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, I really did. It was like, it was who I was. I was teaching there. I was coaching there. I was coaching track even at Wilson. They would help me out, like to run the weight program. They'd give me a track supplement. I go with even like Clifford Hill. We took him to state as a discus guy. It was crazy. Like those were huge accomplishments. So Ursuline never, I don't know if it ever appealed to me because at the time I was kind of in that like underdog role. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes sense, but like I was just fine being at Wilson. But then, you start having a family, you need money, and you start having like a little reputation of putting together some good defenses in tough situations. You're going to play, like we said, Lakewood St. Edwards, and you're coming out of there losing, 21-0, like in a hard fought game. So I became a little bit marketable, and I think even Joe Nora was at Howland with Engel.
Oh, really?
And then Nora ended up taking a principal's job. So there just happened to be an opening, and he called me and said, hey, would you be interested? I looked at their pay scale, and I said, man, I don't know. I mean, I got to do it for my family. I started having kids and stuff, but it was no different. Kids are kids. We still treated the kids the same. We had great athletes, all different colors and wealth and everything. And so Howland wasn't like, and Howland was bad. When you went, it was kind of an underdog thing. Howland wasn't anything. And we turned it around, won the league a lot, went to the playoffs, deep in the playoffs. We had some good runs. Now, obviously Harding at the time was still king dog because, I mean, out there were Claret and Manningham and those guys. I mean, you can't really compete with all that talent. But so Ursa really never appealed to me. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm not saying that derogatorily, but I liked where I was at.
Well, I think sometimes it's good to go somewhere else and learn a new hold, learn something a little bit different than maybe what you've experienced
Yep.
as a player.
Yep.
You know.
And that was it. 19 years old, on the south side of Youngstown. Whew. I mean, and like we said, those guys were men. Willie Thompson and those guys. I mean, those guys were some Gilberts. I mean, they would knock your head off. That's when guys were getting laid out on the football field.
You can't. You're either a wolf or a sheep in that environment in those days, and nobody really wants to be the sheep. So
no.
Now, when do you make that entry into politics?
So then what ended up happening is probably around 2000. We found a house on the sheriff's auction in Poland, and I was battling back and forth because we were living on the north side, so it was kind of an emotional decision. But we got a great deal on it, so I'm like, all right, maybe we move there and then we sell it, we flip it, whatever, so on and so forth. And it was about the same time that I went to Howland. And I went out there, and probably for 5 years, I was just observing, and I didn't like really some of the people that were running the school system, that were like on the school board. There was a disconnect between the school system and the township. And so I just ran, I ran for trustee out there, and I don't know, I was fortunate enough to win. But I think what people didn't realize is Poland changed a lot. Like, a lot of guys from Camo are out there, Lowville, Struthers. It's not, those areas all kind of picked up there. Like, even Canfield is, half of Austintown. I mean, really half of the west side, everything's kind of was migrating during that time in the early 2000s. You guys had your heyday, it Cheney, and everything kind of just seemed like the city just kept getting a little bit smaller and smaller. So, and even early on, I tried to run one time for like 3rd Ward, but I was like 28 years old and lost by like 50 votes. I mean, but the problem is my dad was always a maverick, like in a sense where he did what was right for people, but people voted then. So it was easy to be a coach and a counselor. I mean, like right now, we were just talking about this. Like, I ran for state rep as an independent because I don't really fall into either party wholeheartedly right now. And I got beat up just for being a teacher. I showed them what they sent around. He's indoctrinating our kid. Like, the teaching profession is like under siege. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And which, if for no reason, no reason. And I don't know. So at this stage, I'm kind of content. I'm probably going to retire and just go, work for a couple of my buddies. They got some companies, and just probably go off into the sunset.
Can you compare the two learning curves of being a 19-year-old defensive coordinator to being a first-time township trustee, of getting put into this role that you may not have a background in or the life experience to perform the job and the duties as well as they need to be performed, but somehow there's a challenge in it for you, and then you're in the role. How is that as a coordinator, as a 19-year-old, and then as your first time as a trustee?
I think they parallel each other greatly, other than maybe the little differences, the nuances would be, obviously when you're on the south side of Youngstown, you were dealing with, certain, obviously the elements and, what was going on in the streets more so. When I went to Poland, I was dealing more so with the establishment, because Poland, for the most part, has always been Poland, true and blue. People were born there and they never really left there. And then I kind of broke into that. So when I went back to that, like, problem solving, survival, they both emulated each other, just in, obviously little different ways, different situations. And, my dad, thank God, his advice was always like, hey man, just do everything public. Like, because, just, hey, speak your mind publicly, do what's right for the people. Don't do nothing shady. And, you could potentially have a long career. So really, it still even goes back to just them first days coaching you guys. I mean, you treat kids good. You treat people good. You treat them with respect. Now, you don't get rolled over by them, but you treat everybody fair and do the best you can for them. And, you know, 9 out of 10 times, even me losing this last election, it could be fate. It's that old adage, the butterfly effect. I don't know. Maybe it's this time I've saved lives. And my brother in there was probably, a big part of our life too. He followed me at Ursuline. And I was like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how you paint it, but like the hard nose would do anything, run through a wall. But I was only the size I am. My brother came in and he had everything. I mean, this dude was like 6'3". He was like 240, but he wanted nothing to do with football, like zero. And he never really played. And he kind of went down some roads that, maybe he shouldn't have, but he still landed on his feet, was working at General Motors. And then he fell into that 95 kind of era where, they were passing out Oxycontins like Tic Tacs. It was when they first hit the streets, and he had a hernia surgery. He was working at General Motors, Cadillac. He was doing great. And I mean, he ended up getting hooked on them. And it was just a downward spiral, man. I mean, it was probably, and I still try to make it a positive. I've been on the mental health board for years. I helped Claret establish the Red Zone. I helped him greatly. But man, it was brutal. And it really is just kind of like the crack epidemic of the 2000s. It's just decimating families, man. It's crazy. And that's what we're dealing with in society. It's just these poor kids, they don't have moms, they're living with grandmas. So it's the same thing really the African-American community went through in the early 90s, late 80s. Suburban America is going through it now. Oh, who do you live with? Oh, my aunt. I live with my. So, I mean, I can speak frank like this because I've lived all of it. I was taking care then, and, it happened to me and my family, and I'm, trying to help these kids now. So, but that kind of threw a wrench in everything. And it probably was the demise of my dad. He kind of gave up at the end and passed away. But yeah, you just really not much you could do about it. You just try your best, and, families are going to keep struggling with it. So that's why I'm a big advocate of like mental health in schools, counselors, good coaches. I mean, they save lives. They save lives. I mean, and it's sad that society today, looks at us as like a woke mob or something stupid. I mean, it's unbelievable because, we help more people than probably any profession. I mean, we really do, teachers and coaches.
I kind of have, two more things that I kind of want to ask you based on what you just said. So you growing up as the son of a public figure, how do you approach that being a public figure for your own girls?
Well, I think I'm probably nowhere near as good as a role model as my dad because, again, some of those experiences probably turned me a little sideways. Like my brother passing away, I didn't handle very well. Like my dad, he did nothing. Like when I say like it's not a political, like he never went out. He wasn't a drinker. He wasn't a gambler. Where I kind of maybe tried to rebel a little bit in there, try to act hard, be the drinker, be the, dude that had the card game going on. But once I had my daughters, I just tried to instill the same thing. Now, and I don't want to jump around here, but okay, so she went into nursing at YSU. Now they grew up in Poland. Now there's no African Americans in Poland. Clinton or Locke Beecham was out there, my man, God rest his soul. But point being is, I raised them to the way I was raised, even though I wasn't there on the north side. So she goes into nursing. Her two best friends, were African American girls from, one was from Liberty and one was from Cheney. Like it's just so it's just that emulated, just treat human beings good. And it made me feel good that there really is, hope for like, just society in general, that because more and more kids are being raised in areas that are extremely segregated. Like the city was huge back then. Ursuline and Mooney, we all got along, even if you lived, like you said, you lived on the south side, you knew the guys on the east side or west side. That's really broken down now. And even a lot of minorities have moved to Polaris or, different areas. They're not in the inner cities anymore. So I think just in general is still stick with that same adage. Treat people good, help them the best you can. Don't get rolled over by anybody, but, always, just lend that helping hand and treat people good and do what's right. My dad always said that. I'm not going to go take a bag of money and then be on the front page of the Vindicator. And at the time when we were growing up, the cool people were the ones in the mob. Honest to God, they weren't talking about the people that were doing good. They were like, oh, so-and-so, his dad's in the mob, or, or in the city. It was, oh, he's a big Crip, or he's this dude's like a drug lord. Like, they were the ones getting all the hype. So I just said, hey, do what's right. Don't do anything to embarrass your family. Because you know what? My dad left a good name, and the same way ours all did. Don't do anything to tarnish it. Just treat people good. It's pretty simple. It's that old adage. Everything you learn, you learn in kindergarten. If you just did that, you'd be in good shape. Yes, please, thank you. Just fundamental stuff. So.
And then, when you were talking about the trials of your brother and yourself being that straight ahead approach guy and just attack things with a little bit of tenacity, it jogged my memory on something that I can't even remember where I saw that, but it said something to the effect that when you're in a family that has multiple children, no two kids have the same parents because each kid gets their parent at a different stage of their development in their life. So, you can remember the days before dad is mayor and those tagging along days to Rayen and really being ingrained and in touch with the people in the neighborhoods and in the city, whereas those other siblings behind you, they don't have that same viewpoint or that lens. So, we have to forgive them for not being there, lock and step, and having that experience of being able to persevere and just get through, So,
and I think my dad even sometimes would beat himself up because, he spent a lot of time with me, even though, in coaching, they're not like hugging you and like, coddling you, but you're still there with your pops. Right. Well, my siblings, they went through more with my dad being mayor. He was never around. Yeah. So he always beat himself up. Like when he came home, he was on the phone in crisis mode. Like there was stuff going on, and, he beat himself up even at the end, like, oh, maybe I should have spent more time with, Sean, and then, in the end of the day, it's just, you can't look back, and
it's the price we pay to be providers. Mom is going to get the, hey mom wave on television, dad is probably going to get the, hey, thanks for being hard on me. But, we do what we do, even if we're never thanked for it, we wouldn't have it any other way,
And lastly, I'd like to say too, is if you talk to any coach, like successful, like we've been blessed in this area. I mean, make no mistake about it. Like the guys we talked about and the guys that have been in this fraternity of coaching, through the last 50 years, they all radiate that same mode. I mean, you would say the same thing about Burtis. He was always there for you guys, Pope. I mean, everybody, that we would say about Angle or Butchie, or, I would hope that they would say about me. So it's just, it's a noble profession. It's something great. And I'm just very fortunate to have been, really, I've just been a part of it my whole life. Again, there's not many people that could talk about being at Rayen Stadium with 10,000 people standing on the streets, or, going to a South High football game and seeing Garcia Lane, score 5 touchdowns, and then even go to coaching against Poland and Canfield and different teams. So I feel very blessed that, I've been a part of it. And I was so content that, I really never wanted to be a head coach or even a principal. We talked about this. Like, I think I went for one head coaching job. They offered me the Struthers job. And I said, well, if you guys hire my wife, I was trying to get her a job at the time, and they didn't hire her. So I just said, hey, I'll just stay here. So, and that's probably one thing maybe I could have, wanted to tackle as being a head coach, but I just love, I was pretty happy and fulfilled doing what I was doing. So.
Yeah, I think, hearing your story, just kind of knowing you over the years, but kind of hearing you lay it out and paint the picture. It's definitely a unique one, and the wide range of experiences and to where you started, to where you came, and then having so many big influences on you, I think is that something that you feel like has impacted you as a leader more so than anything else? Is that helped develop it, or what are your thoughts there?
I think so. Because like what we were just talking about, I mean, how many people could actually, walk down to like the red zone with Maurice Claret and feel, and see Marcus and these guys and hug them and like be genuine with them, and then go out and run a meeting in Poland Township. Mm-hmm. So I think your life experiences, I think I'm very, again, blessed and just humbly blessed that I'm able to just go wherever and feel perfectly comfortable. I hate to say, I've probably never been in like a trailer park. I hate to say, but I mean, that's probably one area that I've never been, but it all has molded me. And I'm just glad I started out, man, like you said, like in a situation where, man, I don't know how many people could have survived, and put a defense together at 19, and you're dealing with 18-year-olds. But you know what? I was fortunate because Ron Domesco was a great mentor. And I got to give him a lot of credit. I mean, he was established at South, him and Stoops. I mean, them guys, South was a very prestigious, football school. Even though they fell off a little bit, they were never horrible. They were always competitive during those times. So, having him there obviously gave me, the confidence. And Coach Lyden was there too. Mm-hmm. I mean, we had Coach Lyden, he had a nice career at East, and he's even at Mooney. Like, they were just all good people. So it definitely has molded me into the person that I am, and just, leading by just treating people good. Get to the point. You said it. Dive in it. Problem solve, man. No excuses. Don't start pouting. Let's figure it out. Let's get it done. And that's what I think is lost a little bit too in society, is just, it's easier just to blame somebody. And I even see it with my two kids. My youngest, she's 21. The other's 24. The 21-year-old, that era started like blaming people. Oh, I should be pitching. That ref called a bet. That's like, stop. Stop. Go into golf then. You could only blame yourself, or swimming or something. So, but I don't know. I've just been blessed, and I can't. Money's not everything. Those relations. And half the guys I coached that first year work at the city. Sean Mays and those guys, and Grant, I took advantage of my dad being mayor, got them jobs. They're going to be retiring. They raise families, man. They in all the seeing Dennis and Luther, they raise family. I mean, they put their kids through college and got good pensions, and they could have very easily, not even be alive really during some of those times.
So if you look back over, your journey and your development as a player, getting the opportunity to have that responsibility as a coordinator, as a young guy, what would be your one more down if you could go back and choose to put the pads on or to put the headset on? Where would it be? What would the scenario be? Could you set that up for us?
Man, from a playing standpoint, I know what it is. Mooney ran belly option on us. We were winning 6-0. It was like fourth down to Mooney was like, you knew it was belly option. Like, they weren't throwing it. So fake belly. And what do you think I did? Bit on the belly. And I knew I should have kept coming downhill. All right. So that's the player one. Coaching. Oh man, there's a couple, but we were playing Mansfield, and it was nothing the whole game. And they had a tailback that ended up going to Illinois. He was legit. And they kept running middle screen. I mean, like not many people ran middle screen to a tail, especially to the guy you know is getting the ball. like, you know what I mean? Block, turn around. All these big linemen are blocking. And they ended up there was like 1 second left, and we had two kids got hurt. It's a nothing game, and I should have called timeout, and I didn't. So, I mean, I don't know if it would have changed the scenario, but they scored. So anything was better than giving up the 6 points. So, I just said, oh, throw so-and-so in there, so-and-so in there, because it was a 0-0 game. We were both playing good defense. But you know what? It just goes to show you that in games like that, and it's the hardest thing to teach kids, every single play matters. They get away just blowing dudes out, winning 40-0, thinking you're sweet. But you go into those games where, hey, if you're supposed to do this, you better do it. And if not, it's going to could cost you a first down, could cost you a touchdown. So that's one thing I learned is, hey, don't take that. Hey, call timeout, regroup, kind of get your bearings together. And then at least if you go down and lose, you gave it your best shot. So I don't think we gave that we didn't give that fourth down play our best shot.
Where were you at that time?
I was at Howland, and this was like the third round of the playoffs.
Oh.
I mean, this was nasty. Like this was, we played at, I think we played at Akron. Akron, we were at Akron Stadium. So yeah, you're up so high, you're like, you almost are like disengaged from the game because you're so up high. You're almost like a college coach. I really didn't like it, but again, it was nothing the whole game. But it taught you that lesson that, hey man, even as a coach, there's no tomorrows, man. You got to regroup sometimes and give it your best shot. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
And belly option, man. Come on. Tony played them dudes ever ran. Stack out belly option.
There's a bunch of guys that bit on the belly fake.
Hey, I seen it at Harding. Harding was good. They had 4th and 22. I'm up in the stands. I go, these dudes aren't throwing. They're going to run belly option. Went for like 30. But you know what? They just had everybody blocked up. Everyone was blocked.
It was amazing. No, I really appreciate you doing this, and it's good to be able to just kind of chat in a little different environment. You know what I mean? Kind of get your story, on film. And we started doing this with the Cowboy podcast, and Ron and I talked about doing this. Like, I think there are so many good stories within the city of Youngstown, in the area that people just don't know about, or that a different generation need to hear about. So, I just appreciate you.
You know what? Like right there, like I'm so proud of you guys. I mean, I just was talking to Del Baccio the other day and Manny. I mean, that's what makes it rewarding. It's not like I'm 80 years old, but just seeing these guys are superintendents, they're principals, they're head coaches. I mean, it's rewarding. It's good. And I just want to tell you that.
Yeah. Thanks,
proud of you, man. And
thank you.
And hey, Ron, you do a great job. I mean, I watch these and you're a great success story too. And those are just the things that this area is about. And things weren't rosy back in the day. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to extend my appreciation to you as well, because, sometimes when you have a person who has that persona, and then in your case, you have a very recognizable name, there's certain assumptions that are made because we only get that name through the lens of the media or print. So it's just refreshing to know. And, the Youngstown comes out in you through this mic and through these earbuds. So, I feel a kinship connection to you. I definitely respect the track and the path that you've walked, starting out in what most of us would consider circumstances that the outer line public doesn't ever want to encounter. For you to really stick in there all those years, try different things, and give it a shot, that's more than half the battle. You can't get to the finish line if you never get into the block. So I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing your perspective, sharing your experiences with us. I really appreciated you and listening to what you had to offer today.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories there in history, that's for sure. And I appreciate you guys keeping it all alive, because I mean, you're going to be talking to a lot of people that have a lot of stories. So I'm just blessed to be a part of it. Honestly, part of this, and just a part of the, since the 70s, just being involved with coaching and teaching and helping kids.
Well, don't stop.